Bad Demons. This story is presented by Creepy Misterey, inspired by the chilling works of Robert Bloch. The Curse of the Holloway House. There are some houses that should remain forgotten, places that carry more than just memories. Some say evil lingers in old walls, waiting for the right moment to return. Richard Holloway never believed in curses. But when he inherited the abandoned house on Hollowbrook Lane, he had no idea that something had been waiting for him, watching, whispering his name. And once you hear them, the bad demons never let go. Chapter 1. A new beginning, or a grave mistake? Richard Holloway never believed in curses, ghosts, or things that go bump in the night. He believed in hard work and second chances. After all, his life had been one long series of mistakes, from a failed business to a broken engagement. But this house was supposed to be his fresh start. When the letter arrived from his late uncle's lawyer, Richard couldn't believe his luck. The Hollowbrook Estate, a sprawling Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town, was now his property. The townsfolk warned him not to take it. "That place is cursed," an old man muttered at the gas station. "People go in, but they don't always come out," said the cashier, her eyes wide with warning. Richard laughed off their words. He wasn't one to believe in superstitions. All he knew was that the house was valuable, a potential investment that could fix his financial troubles. "A little cleaning, a few repairs, and I could sell this place for a fortune," he told himself. But deep inside, he knew this house wasn't just about money. It was a symbol, a chance to rebuild his life, to prove to himself that he wasn't a failure. The house that watched. The first time Richard set foot in the Hollowbrook Estate, the air seemed heavier than it should have been. Stale and cold, like a tomb that had been sealed too long. Dust coated everything in thick layers, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling like twisted curtains. Yet despite the decay, Richard felt drawn to the place. The grand staircase, the towering bookshelves in the study, the ornate fireplace with its carved wooden mantel. It all spoke of a forgotten elegance. "This place has potential," he whispered, trying to ignore the unease twisting in his stomach. But as he explored deeper, that uneasy feeling grew stronger. In the dining room, plates still sat on the table, cracked and yellowed with age, but arranged as if someone had only just left the room. In the nursery upstairs, a child's rocking horse sat frozen midsway, as though someone had been riding it when time abruptly stopped. The worst was the scratches. Deep, jagged claw marks carved into the wooden floor in the hallway. They trailed from the doorway to the back of the house, as though something had been dragged away. "Just my imagination," Richard muttered, stepping carefully around the marks. But as he moved to leave the hallway, he heard it soft, faint, yet unmistakable. "Richard Holloway." He froze. The whisper came from the darkened corner of the room. "Who's there?" he called, forcing his voice to sound braver than he felt. Silence. Moments later, a gust of cold wind rushed through the house, slamming a door somewhere upstairs. Richard laughed uneasily to himself. "Wind, just the wind," he mumbled. Yet deep down, something inside him knew better. The mirror in the attic. That evening, Richard decided to explore the attic. He told himself he was searching for antiques, something valuable to help pay his growing debts, but part of him felt compelled to go. The attic was worse than the rest of the house. Colder, darker, the air heavy with something foul. The floor creaked beneath his boots as he rummaged through forgotten trunks and dusty crates. Then he found it, the mirror. It stood at the far end of the attic, covered with a faded white sheet. When Richard pulled the cloth away, he was surprised to see that the mirror was immaculate. No dust, no dirt, as if someone had just cleaned it. But when he leaned closer, something felt off. His reflection stared back, but the eyes seemed a little too dark. The corners of his mouth were turned up ever so slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close to it. Then, as Richard turned to leave, the reflection didn't move. It stood still, its dark eyes following him. And then, it smiled. The warning. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. The whispering voices returned, louder now, calling his name from the shadows. He told himself it was exhaustion, But he knew better. As he lay in bed, something began scratching at his bedroom door. Slow, deliberate scrapes, like nails dragging. Across the wood, he gripped the bedsheets tightly, heart pounding. Then, from the darkness came a voice. Cold, distorted, yet disturbingly familiar. "We see you, Richard. We've always seen you." For the first time, Richard understood the warning the townspeople had tried to give him. This house wasn't just haunted. It was waiting for him. Richard believed he was starting a new chapter in life. A chance to rebuild and rise again. Instead, he had just opened a door he could never close. Was this his new beginning? Or his grave mistake? Chapter 2. Facing the darkness within. Determined to make the house his own, Richard began cleaning. He filled trash bags, wiped down surfaces, and even pried open old cabinets. But as the day went on, the house seemed to resist him. Lights flickered, footsteps echoed in empty hallways, and that whisper, that terrible whisper, kept calling his name. That night, he found an old, full-length mirror in one of the bedrooms. It was covered in dust, but when he wiped it clean, his reflection didn't move. It stood there, staring back at him, smiling. "We see you, Richard. We've always seen you." Chapter 3. The Bad Demons and the Power of Choice. For the first time in his life, Richard had to face something beyond logic. Fear tried to paralyze him, but deep inside, he knew he had two choices: run away or fight back. Summoning courage he didn't know he had, he spoke. "Who are you?" His voice trembled but held firm. The whispering voices surrounded him. Shadows moved along the walls, crawling toward him. "We are the voices of doubt, the nightmares of those who have fallen before you. We are the bad demons, and now you belong to us." For the first time, Richard understood. This house wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by fear, by regret, by everything people refused to face. And if he let it consume him, he would never escape. Chapter 4. A Final Stand Against the Darkness. Richard Holloway had spent his life running. From his failures, his regrets, and now, from the shadows that had made this cursed house their home. But there was nowhere left to run. The house had awakened, and the bad demons were no longer whispering from the corners. They were everywhere. The walls groaned like the house itself was alive. Shadows slithered across the wooden floor, pooling at his feet. Cold, bony fingers brushed against his skin as unseen forces tried to pull him down. And in the center of it all stood the mirror in the attic, the source of the evil, the place where the demons had been watching him all along. His reflection smirked at him, eyes darker than night, teeth too sharp to be human. "You can't fight us, Richard," it whispered. "You've always belonged to us." For the first time, Richard felt it. The weight of his past, the guilt, the self-doubt. The house fed on it, used it to make him weak. But something inside him stirred. He wasn't weak. Not anymore. The choice to fight back. The shadows closed in, their voices growing louder, echoing every failure he had ever faced. "You lost everything. You were never good enough. You should just give in." The darkness wrapped around his throat, suffocating him. For a moment he thought about surrendering, about letting the house take him like it had taken so many before. It would be easy to give in. But then he saw it. A single beam of light, flickering through the cracked window. And in that light he saw a vision of himself, not as a man trapped in darkness, but as a man still fighting. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "No matter how dark it gets, Richard, there is always a way out." With a surge of strength, he ripped himself free from the shadowy hands holding him down. "No," he growled. "You don't own me." Destroying the mirror, breaking the curse. The demons screamed in rage as Richard lunged toward the mirror. He grabbed a rusted iron candlestick from a nearby table, his only weapon, and raised it above his head. The reflection in the mirror laughed. "You can't destroy us, Richard. We are you." For a moment doubt crept back in. What if the demons were right? What if he really was too broken to fight back? But then he remembered this house didn't create his demons. They had always been there, feeding on his fears, his regrets. And now it was time to face them. With all his strength, he smashed the candlestick into the mirror. A deafening shatter filled the attic as glass exploded in all directions. The moment the mirror broke, an unearthly scream ripped through the house. The shadows recoiled, writhing in agony. The walls trembled as the house itself seemed to scream in protest. And then silence. The air grew still. The darkness vanished. The suffocating weight of the house lifted, and for the first time since Richard arrived, he could breathe. It was over. The dawn of a new day. Richard stumbled out of the house, his body aching but his heart lighter than it had been in years. The sun was rising, casting golden light over the Hollowbrook Estate. The house, once looming and suffocating, now stood as just a shell, empty, powerless. He turned back one last time. The curse was broken, but the memories remained. Richard had come to this house searching for a fresh start. And in the end, he had found something even greater, the strength to fight his own demons. The demons we all face. The Hollowbrook Estate would stand empty for years, its walls no longer whispering, its darkness gone. But Richard knew that demons didn't always hide in haunted houses. Sometimes they live inside us. The voices of doubt, the fear of failure, the belief that we are not good enough. But just like Richard, we have a choice. We can give in to the darkness, or we can stand and fight. Presented by Creepy Misterey. Would you face your demons, or would you let them win?